No dynasty was ever destroyed by what it was afraid of. It was destroyed by what it enjoyed. You were handed a story when you were young. Work hard. Endure the difficulty. Build something. And when you've earned it, when you've paid the full price of the climb, you get the reward. The comfort, the rest, the soft landing. That is what all of it was supposed to be for. It is the most expensive lie a man can swallow whole. Because the people who have always understood power, the ones who actually held it, kept it, built things that outlasted them, they understood something colder, something nobody prints on a motivational poster. You do not break a dangerous man by taking things from him. You break him by giving him everything he wants. You do not fight the lion. You feed it. You keep feeding it until it forgets entirely that it was ever a lion at all. By the time this video ends, you will have a name for what that process looks like from the inside. And there's a better than average chance you are already living inside it. This is the dark psychology of pleasure. And it is the most uncomfortable thing I can tell you, because it will never feel uncomfortable while it's happening. Part 1. The winter that broke an army. In the spring of 215 BC, an army walked out of a city and could no longer remember how to be feared. 6 months earlier, that same army had done something Rome would spend centuries trying to explain away. At a place called Cannae, Hannibal of Carthage had surrounded and annihilated the largest military force Rome had ever fielded. Tens of thousands of legionaries destroyed in a single afternoon. The road to Rome itself was open. Hannibal's men were the most lethal fighting force in the ancient world, seasoned by years of marching, by crossing the Alps with elephants, by sleeping in frozen mud and winning anyway. Then they were welcomed into Capua, the second richest city in Italy. Warm baths, soft beds, wine that never ran out, food, perfume, ease, women, everything a soldier dreams about in the cold. The city opened its gates and offered the conquerors a winter of total indulgence. And according to Livy, that winter did what Rome's legions could not. The army that marched out of Capua in spring was a different animal. The men who had grown accustomed to softness kept slipping back toward it. The moment the marching returned, the moment the ground hardened again beneath them, their strength and their spirit gave out. Livy wrote that they collapsed like raw recruits who had never been near a battlefield. Desertions climbed. The edge, the specific sharpness that had made them invincible, was simply gone. The proverb that survived the period says it plainly. Capua was Hannibal's Cannae. The thing that destroyed his army was not a sword. It was a featherbed. The ancients did not retell that story for 1,000 years because they were confused about what it meant. They retold it because they kept watching it happen, to men stronger than themselves, to armies more disciplined than their own, to emperors who had conquered everything and then been conquered by what they had won. Hardship has never weakened a strong man. Hardship is the only thing that ever made him strong. And comfort, the prize at the top of the climb, is the most efficient weapon ever invented for unmaking a dangerous man without lifting a single blade. Part 2, the bill always comes due dopamine, which raises a question no self-help book will ever ask directly. If comfort is doing that to a man, why does it feel so good while it's happening? The answer is sitting inside your skull right now, and it has a chemical name. Most people misunderstand dopamine completely. They think it's the pleasure molecule, the little flood of warmth when something good happens. It isn't. Dopamine is the molecule of wanting, of anticipation, of the leaning forward hunger in the moment before the thing arrives. It evolved to make a creature chase. Chase food, chase a mate, chase the next ridge over. And it fires hardest not when you receive the reward, but when you are reaching for it. Dopamine is the engine of pursuit. It is, in a very precise biological sense, the chemical signature of a man on a mission. Here is what nobody tells you about that engine. It runs on a balance. The psychiatrist Anna Lemke describes the brain's reward system as an internal seesaw, pleasure on one side, pain on the other. Tip it hard toward pleasure, and the brain, which cares about one thing above everything else, equilibrium, does not simply enjoy the ride. It floods the other side with discomfort to level the scale. This is the opponent process mechanism, well documented in neuroscience for decades. And it has a feature that should concern you. The brain does not stop pushing when the scale hits even. It overshoots. It tips you past neutral into deficit. You feel that overshoot every single day, and you have been blaming it on the wrong things. The flatness after the binge. The hollow after the high. The gray Sunday evening dread that follows a weekend of nothing but ease. That low, irritable emptiness that shadows every cheap pleasure. That is not a separate problem from a pleasure. It is the invoice for the pleasure. Same transaction, delayed delivery. And when you keep tipping the seesaw, the scroll, the sugar, the pornography, the dozen small dopamine hits before you've left the bed in the morning, the brain stops bothering to reset. It downregulates. It withdraws its own receptors. It becomes deaf to its own chemistry. Brain imaging from researchers like Nora Fokow shows dopamine signaling in heavily overstimulated brains running below baseline, not elevated below the floor, weeks into abstinence. The man who chased pleasure relentlessly does not end up euphoric. He ends up unable to feel much of anything at all. The clinical term is anhedonia, the inability to take pleasure in things that should produce pleasure. The man in dopamine deficit needs the stimulation now not to feel good, just to feel normal. Just to climb back up to the baseline everyone else stands on for free. The reward system that was built to make you hunt has been hijacked into making you graze. And a grazing animal does not conquer anything. It just keeps its head down, chewing, until something with sharper teeth wanders by. Part 3. The appetite that eats itself. In 1956, a researcher named Frank Beach documented one of the strangest patterns in biology and named it after a sitting U.S. president with a straight face. The setup is simple and has been replicated across nearly every species ever tested. A male rat in a cage with a female. He mates. He mates again. Eventually he is spent, sexually exhausted, completely uninterested. By every measure his drive is finished. Now introduce a new female. He restarts instantly. Not rested. Restarted. The exhaustion evaporates. The drive returns, sometimes stronger than the first time. They call it the Coolidge effect. And inside the brain, it is not subtle. Dopamine in the reward center collapses as the male satiates with the familiar, and then spikes violently the moment novelty arrives. The drive was never about the act. It was about the new. Now hold that fact next to the device in your pocket. For all of human history, novelty was rare and it was earned. A new hunt, a new territory, new things cost something. Your reward circuitry was calibrated for a world where the genuinely new arrived perhaps a few times a year, if you fought for it. Then we built an infinite novelty machine and handed it to every man on earth for free. An endless scroll of new faces, new bodies, new stimulation, each one a fresh spike. Each spike training the system that the next one might be better than the one in front of you right now. The appetite doesn't get satisfied. It gets trained to need more than reality can ever supply. A man who feeds this engine isn't just wasting hours. He is recalibrating his entire wanting system around a stimulus no real relationship, no real achievement, no actual life can compete with. He sits across from someone who genuinely loves him and feels a low static of boredom he cannot explain. He reaches the goal he worked years for, and it tastes like cardboard because his baseline for exciting has been jacked past anything the physical world can match. He has trained himself to be bored by his own life, and he does not experience this as weakness. He experiences it as the world being gray. He will spend years looking for the external thing that will finally make him feel alive, never suspecting he burned out the part of himself that was supposed to do the feeling. Part 4. The quietest weapon ever made. I've been describing this as an accident so far, a side effect of abundance, something that just happens to men in a world too rich for the brains they were issued. It is time to stop being polite about that, because for most of recorded history, this was not an accident. It was a method. How do you neutralize a rival you cannot defeat by force? Killing creates martyrs. It sparks revolts. It invites revenge from his sons and grandsons for 3 generations. The crude rulers tried it and spent their entire reigns managing the fires. The cunning ones discovered something better. You can disarm a dangerous man completely, permanently, and gratefully by drowning him in pleasure. You take the rival prince, the ambitious heir, the man whose ambition could threaten your throne, and you do not imprison him. You give him a palace. You give him feasts, wine, hunting grounds, concubines, every indulgence he could name. You make his life so soft, so saturated, so endlessly pleasant that the hunger that made him dangerous quietly dissolves over months and years until the man who have raised an army is now choosing between desserts. He is no longer a threat to anyone, least of all to the person who defanged him, and he will defend his own cage because it is upholstered. Conquered kings were pensioned into luxury precisely because a gilded life is a more reliable prison than an iron one. The prisoner in the gilded cage stops wanting to leave. Now look at what has been built around you. I'm not giving you a conspiracy theory. No one in a control room is plotting your specific softening. It is worse than that, and stranger. The same mechanism has been industrialized, automated, and aimed at every man simultaneously. Not by a tyrant, by an economy that discovered the single most profitable thing can do is keep you tipping that seesaw toward pleasure indefinitely. Every frictionless app, every feed engineered to never reach an end. Every flavor optimized in a lab to override the off-switch your body was born with. The old emperors had to capture you first. Now you walk into the palace yourself, and you lock the door from the inside. Part 5. Seneca and the Soft-Bodied. Seneca was the richest philosopher in Rome, advisor to an emperor, a man who could have indulged in anything the ancient world had on offer. Which is exactly why his warning lands harder than a monk's. He was not abstaining out of ignorance. He was surrounded by every pleasure available to the wealthiest civilization on earth, and he watched what it did. In his letters, Seneca drew a line that the modern world has completely erased. He separated pleasure, voluptas the cheap, restless, external buzz from joy. Gaudium, the deep, stable, internal kind that comes from living rightly and owes nothing to circumstance. Pleasure, he warned, when it is not kept on a leash, does not lead to more pleasure. It rushes headlong into its opposite. The pursuit of it ends in something that looks remarkably like its absence. He understood the seesaw 2,000 years before anyone could scan a brain. But his sharpest observation was about the body. Seneca watched the wealthy of Rome cushion themselves from every form of discomfort. Heated floors, exotic foods, the body insulated against cold, against hunger, against the friction of reality. And he noticed something specific. The more you protect a man from hardship, the smaller the hardship needs to be to destroy him. Comfort does not fortify. It thins the walls. A man who has never been cold is broken by a draft. A man who has never been hungry panics at a delayed meal. A man who has arranged his life so that he never has to feel genuine discomfort has, without quite realizing it, handed the controls of his nervous system to anyone willing to threaten his comfort. The man who cannot tolerate discomfort is already owned. He folds under the smallest pressure because the threat of losing his ease makes him cave every time. His boss knows it. His habits know it. Anyone who can take away his next hit of comfort holds a leash he cannot see. Your softness is a map of where to push you. The Stoics were not recommending suffering because they were grim. They were recommending it because a man who has voluntarily made friends with hardship is the one man in the room who cannot be controlled by it. Part 6. The man who blinks / the boy who never lands. Friedrich Nietzsche feared one creature above all others. Not the tyrant, not the criminal, not the nihilist who believed in nothing. He feared the man who was perfectly comfortable. In Thus Spoke Zarathustra, he sketched a figure he called the last man, the end product of a civilization that had made comfort its highest value. The last man has as little pleasure for the day and as little pleasure for the night. He has eliminated risk, hardship, and genuine desire from his life. He is warm. He is fed. He is entertained. He is safe. He has invented happiness. And then Nietzsche delivers the line that should chill you. And he blinks. A small, contented animal blink. No fire behind the eyes. No longing. No hunger aimed at the horizon. Nietzsche said the last man can no longer give birth to a dancing star, meaning he no longer carries enough inner tension, enough unmet desire, enough of the productive discomfort of an unlived life to create anything, become anything, or aim at anything beyond his next comfort. And the detail that makes the last man the most disturbing figure in all of philosophy, he is not suffering. He feels fine. If you told him he'd been hollowed out, he would look at you genuinely puzzled and reach for his snack. He does not experience his diminishment as loss, because the faculty that would allow him to feel the loss, the longing, the hunger, the divine discontent, is the exact thing comfort dissolved first. Carl Jung saw the same collapse, but located it in a specific kind of man. He wrote about an archetype the Romans called the pure eternus, the eternal boy, the man who refuses at some deep level to fully land in the weight of an adult life. You know him. He is often charming, gifted, full of obvious potential. He is always about to do the great thing, the business he will start, the commitment he will finally make, the life he will get serious about. But he lives in what Jung's student Marie-Louise von Franz called the provisional life. always one step removed from real commitment, keeping every door open, refusing to plant his feet in any single hard reality. What keeps the eternal boy airborne decade after decade? Well, it's a man stay in the provisional life until his hair goes gray. Pleasure, the constant low-grade availability of comfort and stimulation that takes just enough edge off the dissatisfaction to keep him from ever being desperate. Enough to change. Real growth requires a specific kind of suffering. The friction of committing, failing, being humiliated, and grinding through anyway. The eternal boy has built a life with an escape hatch from every one of those moments. He never has to land, so he never does. Part 7. What the formidable ones actually do. Here is the complete picture, the full shape of the argument. An army that forgot how to be feared after one soft winter. A reward system that turns abundance into numbness and novelty into a hunger reality can never satisfy. The oldest power strategy there is, drowning the dangerous man in exactly what he wants. A Stoic's warning that the soft body hands its controls to anyone willing to yank them. A man who feels fine while being emptied out. A gifted boy who never lands because landing costs something he has trained himself not to pay. Stack all of it, and you arrive at the thing no one wants written plainly. Pleasure is not the reward for power. Pleasure is the tax on it. And the men who actually hold power have always quietly paid as little of that tax as they could get away with. People get this wrong about the genuinely formidable. They assume the man at the top is the man indulging the most luxury, the most ease. Sometimes he displays that because display is useful. But watch what the actually powerful do in private. You will find something closer to monastic. They ration. They train discomfort deliberately. They take the cold over the warm, the hard conversation over the comfortable silence, the friction of real effort over the frictionless escape. Not because they're saints, because they understand the exact mechanism we just walked through. They are protecting the engine. They keep their wanting sharp on purpose because a sharp want is the source of everything they have built. And they have figured out the one move the soft man never makes. They say no to pleasures they could easily have. Not all pleasures. They could easily have. Not all pleasures. Not forever, but routinely, deliberately, as a discipline. They leave the easy reward on the table and walk away. Precisely because the ability to do that is the rarest form of power there is. The difference between the lion that walks past the carcass and the animal that eats whatever is placed in front of it. One owns its appetite. The other is owned by it. 2,500 years ago, Herodotus closed his entire life's work, the record of the greatest empire of his age, not on a battle, on a conversation. The Persians had just become the most powerful people on earth. They had conquered everything. And some of the nobles came to their king Cyrus with a sensible proposal. Now that they ruled the world, why keep living in their harsh, rocky, difficult homeland? Why not move the whole people somewhere rich, somewhere soft, somewhere worthy of conquerors? Cyrus listened. Then he told them to go ahead, but to understand the price. Soft lands breed soft men. Rich earth and great warriors do not grow from the same soil. Move to the easy country, he said, and prepare to stop being rulers and start being ruled. The Persians chose to stay, rulers on the barren mountainside. That was the day they were still strong. Herodotus chose that scene to close his entire account of the Persian Empire because he had watched the whole arc. He knew where comfort takes a people who have forgotten what made them dangerous. And he knew it always feels, in the moment, like the obvious and reasonable thing. Of course we should move to the better land. Of course we have earned the soft life. Of course the prize of all this struggle is finally getting to rest. You make a version of that choice every single day. Nobody announces it. There is no figure at your door. Just a soft thing sitting there asking nothing of you. And a quieter and quieter voice asking whether you are still the kind of man who can walk past. The question is not whether you can get pleasure. Pleasure has never been easier to get. It is piped into your hand 24 hours a day. The question is whether you can still refuse it. Whether when the easy hit is sitting right there, free, frictionless, asking nothing, you still have the one muscle that lets you say, not now. If you do, you are dangerous in the way that matters. If you cannot remember the last time you turned down a pleasure you could have had, then somewhere along the line, gently, pleasantly, without a single blow being thrown, you were already fed. The lion was never killed. It was fed. The only question that remains is whether it still remembers it was ever a lion at all. If this video hits something in you, share it with one man who needs to hear it. Subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. And like this video, if it landed, it helps more people find their way here. The door is open. I'll see you on the other side.